Okay, can everybody hear me? Can you hear me? Yes? All right, we're going to get started here tonight. To start this off, just first of all, thank you for being here. My name is Adam Sayer. I'm the Deputy City Administrator for the City of Fitchburg. We're here tonight to give a presentation about the new, yes, if you can't hear, raise your hand. I move a lot, so it's my fault. We're here tonight to give a presentation about the new police facility. Also here tonight with us is Alderperson Jim Wheeler. Jim is out in the hallway. Jim, if you want to just wave your hand around a little bit. There's Jim. We also have with us tonight Brian Russell. Brian is a PFC commissioner. Brian, if you want to raise your hand. Brian's hand is raised right there. So the purpose of the meeting tonight is to share details on the new police facility. This is the 6th public meeting that we've had on this. We're here to kind of talk about that. The presentation has been reorganized from previous presentations. We've had a lot of questions as part of this process. So the police department has reorganized their presentation based upon the comments and questions that they received. So for tonight, we're going to hold all questions until the end. And when we get to that point, what I'll do is if you raise your hand, I'll walk around with this microphone because we are recording this. And if we don't have you on the microphone, we won't be able to hear the question for, if anyone watches this video later on. So when we get to that point, raise your hand. I'll walk around with this, hand you the mic. And then once you're done asking your question, I'll take the mic back. They'll be answered. And we'll move on to the next person. So the focus tonight is the police facility, but this does have a larger impact on the city. Right now, the police department is in the basement of City Hall. City Hall is out of space. Quite honestly, I've been with the city now for 5 months. The office I went into is the former, basically, IT department office. They were moved down to the basement. They're in a room in the basement that has no windows. It's not the greatest situation. But I took the last office that was on the 2nd floor. When the police department moves out of the building, the rest of the departments will be reorganized. We'll be able to redo the entire building, and we'll gain more space where we can have more space for our existing staff and also our future staff that we'll be adding at some point in the future. So it does create additional space for the city as a whole. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is to share information about the new project. There is an additional meeting that will happen next Tuesday night. That's February 13th at 7:30 p.m. The Fitchburg Common Council is scheduled to consider the approval of the schematic design for the design of the building along with a budget amendment for the original $35 million that was approved for this project. If you're interested in attending that meeting, you're more than welcome to attend it. It is open to the public. If you're interested in making comments at that meeting, there'll be forms you can fill out. If you fill out the form, turn the form in, you'll be allowed to speak at that meeting as well too. If you're not interested in attending the meeting, we do have all our meetings online. We post all our meetings onto YouTube. We post all our meetings on Fact TV, which is on the city's website. I would encourage you to look at that. Or if you can't make the meeting, you want to provide comments, there is on the handout, which is in the back. If you have not gotten one, there are handouts in the back. There's the contact for the police facility comments. All of those comments go to the Common Council who'll be voting on this matter. So I would encourage you to send your comments off to the Common Council if you can't make that meeting. Lastly, just a couple of notes for tonight. We do have a hard stop at this meeting at 8:30 p.m. So we have this space only until about 9 o'clock, and we obviously have to clean up the room as well. So as we get closer to that 8:30 time, I'll be kind of just letting people know that, hey, it's 8:15, 8:20, we've got 10, 15 minutes left. There'll be a hard stop coming up. So just letting everyone know, just be aware of that we do have that stop at 8:30. The second item is just as a reminder tonight, there's a lot of different opinions on this matter. I just would encourage everyone to be respectful and kind. Ultimately, if you have comments, we want to hear them. We want you to share them. But there's a lot of different opinions on this. So if you're making comments, just be respectful and kind to everybody. That's all we ask in return. So with that, once again, thank you for being here tonight. I'm going to turn it over to Chief Morales. See if anything.
Hello, everyone. I'm Chief Al Morales. Thank you all for coming today. We have a presentation. We have 2 of our future captains for the city of Fitchburg that are going to be presenting. They've done a lot of work. We've been starting this presentation, informing the residents of Fitchburg since January of 2023. Some meetings were small, some meetings were bigger. As we ended the year, there was more information that was strictly on the police facility. That's future Captain Ed Hardwick, who's going to be doing the majority of the presentation. And you also have future Captain Andrew McCarthy. I do want to acknowledge, and I would like for her to at least come in here. She came in at the start of of our Deputy City Administrator's presentation, but our mayor is here, and I would like for you all to see her. Mayor Arata Frata, if you're in the back, could you come in? Where's she? Oh, here she is. I saw you in the back. Do you want to say any words?
No, I'm fine. So if there is any question for me, but I am fine.
Okay. Sounds good. I think that's the only one we missed. I will be present for questions afterwards. So we'll get it started. Captain Hardwick.
Excuse me. Thank you, Chief. And thank you again, everyone, for joining us tonight. We want to make sure that people have the information about this project. A lot of work has gone into this project so far, and we serve a community, so it's important for us to inform you of what's going on with this project. As the Deputy City Administrator indicated, we're trying to formulate this presentation around a lot of the common questions that we've been receiving. I'm going to try to get through this quickly so we can answer questions that you may have that I don't get to in the presentation. So the first question, if you can follow along here, why does the city need a new police facility? Our Deputy City Administrator indicated we are out of space at City Hall. We currently occupy the lower 2 levels, really a level and a half of City Hall. Not only are we out of space, but City Hall is out of space in general. We need space not only now, but obviously Fitchburg is the fastest growing city in the state. And so we anticipate growth moving forward for both the police department and City Hall staff. So the future space need is really driving a lot of the design of this facility. So this road actually started back before the year 2000 when the City Hall building right next to the library was built. Again, the police department occupied the lower basement level, half of the basement level, and the main level. If you've been to City Hall, the police department, we're on the side of the building there, not at the main entrance, but our main entrance is along the side from that picture. Less than 15 years, or right around 15 years moving into the building, the city started realizing that we were already running out of space. We had started running out of offices, conference rooms, and a variety of other room was getting tight in the police department and City Hall. So in 2014, the city commissioned a space needs study. That space needs study then leads us down into this process that we're going to talk about. So how do we know how much space we need? Because we're talking about square footage when we're talking about the size of this police facility, which obviously drives cost. So in 2014, outside firm came in and did a space needs study looking at future growth of the city, looking at future growth of city staff and the police department. That space needs study looked out, going all the way out to 20 years. And if you think back, this is already back in 2014, we're already 10 years into that. So in addition, it also examined the options of having an addition onto City Hall or a standalone police facility. That study was published in February 2015, and that's available on the website if you follow the link that's on that card there. Ultimately, when looking at a standalone police facility, this study indicated that to accommodate the personnel and equipment associated with those personnel, that by the year 2035, we would need approximately 78,000 square feet of building. Now, this is gross square footage, so this includes things like hallways, elevator shafts, things that aren't necessarily usable space. But when we're talking about the size of the actual facility, that's the total square footage. You can see all the way at 2020 already, they were predicting that we would need around 60,000 square feet to accommodate a variety of things, including the growing personnel, which we'll talk about in just a second, and then the equipment that goes along with that. So in 2014, they identified several immediate needs in that study. One of the needs that's most noticeable to visitors to City Hall is the ventilation system in our evidence storage facility. So the evidence storage facility is in the basement of the police department. And any evidence that's brought in there, due to the design of that room, that ventilation system is intertwined with City Hall. So if you attend a common council meeting, you can smell what's in the evidence facility, to include large amounts of marijuana. We also have things with biological evidence on them that can circulate freely through the system. The industry standard is that you don't have you have a separate ventilation system. We do not have that. As I mentioned here, we had run out of office space and conference rooms back in 2014. And indoor parking, which tonight it's kind of a different situation, rain, usually this time of year we're talking about snow, but we don't have the ability to park all of our vehicles inside. Now that might not seem like a big idea. A lot of people park their cars outside. We understand that. However, I can remember a number of times working night shift, going out to my car at 11 o'clock and having to scrape 2 to 3 inches of snow off my windshield before I could respond to an emergency call. So that car that then has several $1,000s of electronics in it, primarily computers, which help us give us information when we're responding to a call, that computer then also takes a long time to warm up. So it might be a good 25 to 30 minutes before I'm able to respond appropriately with the information that I need to a call. That can be solved by parking our cars inside. So before we look into the future, again, we're planning for the future with this facility. We're going to take a look back into the past. So go back 14 years ago now to 2010. City's population was around 25,000. With the attachment of the town of Madison last year, we hit 34,000. So you can see some significant growth there. And in 2010, we had 44 sworn personnel, and we're working in that 17,000 square feet of space. Going into last year, we had moved up to 55 sworn personnel. And again, 2010, we're not too far off from when we already identified that we'd run out of room. So now we're having more people work in that building. And on top of the sworn personnel, we also have civilian personnel who are working in there, helping with records and other services, including dispatch. So as I mentioned, Fitchburg's fastest growing city in the state. Around 725 to 750 residents a year. So projecting that out to 2033, we're over 40,000 residents. If you look at the number here, 79 for sworn personnel. In the Midwest, the average number of sworn officers per 1,000 residents is around 1.9. We are one of the lowest staffed police departments of mid-sized cities in Wisconsin. We're around 1.6. So if we were to move up to that ideal staffing level, again, planning for the future, we're looking at 79 sworn personnel. So again, we're talking same size building potentially right now going into that space. Going all the way forward out to 2043, we're almost at 50,000 residents, and there are some projections that are saying that that population is just going to continue to grow due to a variety of factors that influence migration, population changes. We could be well over 50,000 residents. And so following that same formula out, we would look at almost 100 sworn police officers. Now this is just to provide basic police services. This is not growing to any specialized sort of policing. This is providing basic police services. We cover 35 square miles. We go a great distance down the Beltline, although we don't actually cover the Beltline. If you're to go from one exit to another, that's a good travel time. And then we go all the way down to Oregon. So we have a large jurisdiction to cover, and we often only have 4 to 5 officers working in that entire jurisdiction. So this is just to meet minimum standards really for responding to calls for service, that 93 number there. So how has the city planned financially for this project? And then can this money be spent on something else? Those are very common questions. So we are not the financial experts. We have our finance director that's prepared a video for everyone here that we're going to play, and she is going to cover a few of those common questions, all right?
Hello, my name is Misty Dodge. I'm the finance director here at the City of Fitchburg. We've been getting some recurring questions about the new police services facility that's been proposed, and we're hoping that at least 3 of them we can address with this video. Now, if you have more questions, I included my contact information at the end. Definitely feel free to reach out. The first question I'd like to discuss is, has the city been including this new facility in the financial planning of the city? The answer is yes. But first, I'd like to talk a little bit more about the overall financial processes of the city. In general, it can be split into 3 different stages. So there's planning, appropriation, and spending. On planning, the city has a CIP, or a capital improvement plan. This financial planning tool is used by council in order to plan for those large capital projects. This includes things like roads and facilities and equipment. And it's important to note that this is just a plan. This is not actually directing staff to continue on a project or to start signing contracts. It's just a plan. But it's a great tool for the council to use to know where the city is going with those large dollar amounts. The projects in that adopted CIP then move on to the annual budget or the appropriation stage. This is another public process. At the end, council adopts the annual budget and appropriates the city's funds. And that's how they determine how those funds can be used. The revenue sources in the city's budget includes property taxes, borrowed funds, user fees, aids, etc. And then that money is appropriated by saying how it can be spent on things like city staff, capital costs, debt payments, and other operational costs. Once that project has been budgeted or appropriated, then it moves on to the spending stage. At that point, staff is directed to work on that project, start getting contracts, start getting proposals. But in general, if it's $25,000 or more, council still needs to act on it to give us permission to sign those contracts. So, looking at just the police services facility, that discussion started back in 2014 when there was a space needs analysis done. From a financial planning perspective, it first entered the stage in the mayor's proposed 2016 to 2020 CIP. Now, granted, that project was delayed by the council during that process outside of the CIP, but because it was in that mayor's proposal, it was included in the financial management plan that we presented to council back in June of 2015. The project then moved past the planning stage and into the appropriation stage starting in 2022. And you can see on the screen the different amounts that have been appropriated for this project from 2022 through 2024. And it's been a total of $35 million authorized. Since the funds were appropriated, staff then moved on to the spending stage. There's been a design contract that was authorized by council, and then council will still need to act on the bid, the construction bid when that comes through, and then any changes to that appropriation amount would also need to go through council. So as you can see, this facility has been talked about for many years now, and it's just moving through all of the city's established processes. Another question that we get asked frequently is, could there be better outcomes if the city spent the money planned for this new facility on something else? Ideas we've heard are things like additional staffing, additional pay for existing staffing, or even partnerships with other groups in order to address underlying concerns like poverty, housing, food insecurity, or even job access. While those are definitely worthwhile goals, the short answer is that the money authorized for the facility cannot be used for staffing or partnerships. And the biggest reason is that capital money is different than operating money. So first, capital money, that is items that are identified in the CIP and includes fixed asset purchases or items with a useful life greater than a year. And then there's operating money, which is your day-to-day costs, such as staffing, utilities, etc. The new facility is a capital project that is primarily funded with bonds or 20-year debt. Those bonds are also restricted by statute and can only be spent on certain things. These would include things like facilities or road projects. So this same borrowed money would not be able to be used for operational costs. Another piece to this question is the state-imposed levy limits. Under statute, the council can increase property taxes to repay any amount of the money that is borrowed, principal and interest. However, if the council wanted to increase the operating budget, those costs would need to be absorbed within the levy limits that we are living under. So, no, that borrowed money authorized for this facility cannot be used on operational items like staffing and partnerships. The last question I would like to address in this video are, what are the financial impacts of the proposed new facility? So first, there are two different categories of financial impact for this facility. First is the capital cost. This would include the cost to actually build the facility, and then also the money that we need to pay back, so the debt payments, including principal and interest. On the other side, there's also operational costs for the building, things like a custodian to help maintain and clean the facility, utilities, maintenance, insurance, and then also ongoing capital costs for things like when the HVAC system goes out. So I ran 3 examples for the borrowed money. So for all of these examples, I assumed it would be borrowed over 20 years, that the interest would be 3%, and that it would be an even annual payment. So the total payment each year would be the same for both principal and interest combined. So using those assumptions, I ran these 3 examples. The first example is for $35 million borrowed, which is what is currently authorized or appropriated. That would equate to a $2.4 million debt payment each year, and the impact to property owners would be $51 per year per $100,000 of assessed value, or $195 per year for the average home. In the second example, I used $45 million of borrowed money. Same assumptions, it would be a $3 million debt payment each year, and the impact to the property owners would be $66 per $100,000 of assessed value, or $251 for the average home. And in the last example, I included $49.2 million of borrowed cost. And that's because that's the current estimate of what this facility will require. That would equate to a $3.3 million debt payment, and the impact to property owners would be $73 per year, or $279 for the average home. Flipping to the operating costs, if those are assumed to be $551,000 annually, that would equate to an impact of $1 per year per $100,000 of assessed value, or $4 per year on the average home. Now, these statistics are not meant to imply that the financial impact is only borne by the property owners. I do recognize that a lot of times the property tax increases will also pass on to renters, but that is a little harder to quantify. So we really focus on kind of that property owner impact here. I wanted to include some additional resources as well, in case you're interested. The capital improvement plan is available out on the website. The police services facility is on page 167, and it's got all of the history of the project in there, so you can see exactly how it has evolved over the years as a part of the financial planning. Also included are links to the city's budget, the financial management plan that was most recently completed, and then also the city's external audit. The city really cares about being transparent, and all of this information is available for you out on the website. I hope this video helped answer at least some of those questions that have been coming up a lot lately. If you have more, feel free to reach out to me or the project team, included my contact information here. There's also a separate page on the city's website that has the entire history of the police services facility and a lot of different information out there too, if you're interested in learning more. You can also sign up for notifications. There is a separate channel just for this particular project, but you can also sign up for notifications for a lot of different things that are happening at the city. So if you're interested in the city's operations and what we're doing, definitely sign up for those notifications. Thank you for your interest in the city's finances, and I hope you have a great day.
So, as our finance director indicated, this has been included in a process for several years now. If we go back and think about that space needs study that was done, that then kickstarted a process to then get the facility on the books in the planning stages, going back to 2016. And you start seeing it appear here, going through all these different phases as this budget is addressed every year by the Common Council. Originally, the $25 million, if you look in here, was indicated, and that was because the study that was done was based on the pricing and the square footage needs and things that were relevant in the initial study done back then. As we get closer to the last few years, that number increased up to $35 million to account for the cost increase of everything, and really address some beginning stages of inflation in size as well. That money from that increase from $35 million was reduced back down to $25 million. And then last year, that was increased back up to $35 million through the CIP budget. So again, just to summarize, this has been going on at the council level for a number of years and has been set aside for funding for a number of years as well. So how has the recent planning process developed? In January of last year, the budget stood at $25 million. And the process started moving forward to design the building. In April, after a competitive bid process, the City Council or Common Council approved a contract with an architectural and engineering firm to begin the design process. And in June, city staff and police department staff started meeting with that firm to go through the needs of the police department for the current needs and the future. In July, after another competitive bid process, the City Common Council approved a contract with a construction management company. This company is the kind of professional advisor as it relates to construction matters on the project. In July of 2023 was the first meeting of the Police Facility Oversight Committee. We have a couple members in attendance this evening. I will point out that that's a public meeting. If you go to the webpage that's on the card that you could have grabbed on the way in there, all of the meetings are posted on there for review. In July, as a result of this Common Council's CIP budget, that $10 million was put back in, moving the budget back up to $35 million for the project. In December, the construction management company that's working on the project delivered its first estimate. So after working with the architects and designing the blueprints essentially for the facility, which are back there, are actually moved out into the hallway now at this point. That estimate, and this is an estimate, came in at $49.2 million. In January of this year, we presented some additional information to the Common Council. We had been on track for schematic design approval at that point, but we provided some additional information to the Council. The next step in this, after approval of schematic design, is then to start filling in the details. So the schematic design are the big chunks of the space, and then the design development are the smaller pieces, what goes in each room. There will be additional public meetings once that phase comes with design development, and then the Common Council would approve the design of that phase. Starting in July, then the Common Council would open up the process for bidding for construction. And then in the fall, we would be potentially considering bids, Common Council for approval, with construction beginning potentially shortly thereafter that in September, and then with the desired move-in date, completion date of May 2026. I also have up here when we talk about city committees that have been involved in this has also gone before the Board of Public Works, the Finance Committee, Resource Conservation Committee, the Plan Commission, and the Fitchburg Center group. As the Deputy City Administrator indicated, this is the 6th meeting this year that we've had on the topic, and we had an additional meeting. Our first meeting was in November of last year to present this information, because at that point we didn't even really have the full estimate and understanding of the scope of the project at that point. So where's the facility going to go and why? If you're familiar with where the library and City Hall is, it is down Fish Hatchery Road at the intersection of Fish Hatchery and Lacey Road. Apologize, you're not necessarily able to make it out, especially in the back there. The red circle on there, if you can see, is where that's located. The rest of this is the boundaries of the city. And you can see that as the city develops, as anticipated, that development's going to continue likely down to the south. And so that location where we're at right now is really strategically kind of in the center of the city. Now, it's not necessarily as relevant as it might be with a fire department for response times. However, having the ability for officers to go back to a facility that's located centrally in the city is important for us. Our officers obviously work out of their cars primarily, but that is an ideal location. The other component of the site location is that this land was donated to us, and through a process, we were able to convert that land to be able to be used for government purposes. So another component of this land transfer is coming up here on February 20th, and it's not really a transfer here, it's a change to the comprehensive plan. So essentially converting this was originally dedicated as parkland. However, there had been no movement or interest in moving that into parkland. And so it essentially, in order to use that space, there's a legal process that's already occurred in the court system. And then the Plan Commission has to make a minor change to the comprehensive plan. So We won't be encroaching on any environmental zones in there. The portion of the property that we'll be using is on the corner. This is Research Park that splits where the library is and the empty lot is now, Lacey Road and Fish Hatchery Road here. So how is the building designed? What does a police building cost? Why does it cost more than a regular building? And was it designed to fit the space or the budget? There's a couple questions we'll cover here. So a police facility is purpose-built. It's not just an office space. We can't pick up the majority of what we do and put it in a regular office space. There are certain requirements, certain needs of a police facility that we can't find in a regular common office environment. Those things include ballistic glass in certain areas, ballistic proofing, so making space resistant to bullets for safety of everyone inside. Those are a couple examples. We also have additional security measures, things that you can't just move into an office space and have. So there are some specific needs in addition to specific rooms, including a holding area, an evidence processing and storage area, and a variety of other police-specific needs in a building. Again, we're also looking for at least 20 years to meet our needs here. The building we intend to last a whole lot longer, but at least to meet our minimum space needs to accommodate our staff for the next 20 years. It's not really feasible. There are core functions to a police facility to include the holding area, evidence processing, evidence storage. In our dispatch center, we are one of few communities that still maintains our own dispatch center. So we can't really build half of one of those rooms. We have to have a core space for that. We can fill it maybe halfway, but we have to have those core functions. It's also more cost efficient to build now for the future, because as we've seen with the cost of anything increasing over the last few years, it's likely that the cost is only going to continue to increase. So when we look at how we design a facility and what's important in a facility, we're looking at a couple of key documents that have guided a lot of planning and policing recently. Going back a few years to President Obama's 21st Century Report on Policing, and even a little bit further back, the United Way of Dane County worked with the NAACP and law enforcement leaders to work on recommendations related to police use of force. That document, which is available on our website, you can Google it as well, is out there, contains a number of recommendations to improve and address issues in policing. A couple of the core things that are contained in both of those are enhanced accessibility for the public to increase community engagement. Officer training is right in the middle of both of those. Officer wellness and technology. So officer wellness is a pretty basic principle that we can't expect officers to take care of the community if they're not well themselves. Just like the community, officers experience a number of things that can impact them. And so when they're all experiencing those things day after day, call after call, we want to make sure that they're taken care of. And then technology. Policing has advanced in a number of ways, technology-wise and just efficiency-wise, since this building, or the building that we're currently in, was built. And we anticipate that it's going to continue to change. So we want to be able to position ourselves in a way where we can accommodate that future technology. The top bullet point up here is accreditation. Accreditation is essentially a gold standard or best practices for any field. In law enforcement, there are a couple of bodies that provide accreditation services. And in law enforcement and policing, that means that we have core key policies that we're updating and staying true to. However, one component of accreditation with our current facility looks at a building. We do not meet accreditation standards. We can't meet accreditation standards due to some limitations of our facility that we'll talk about. So looking at all the things that go into a police facility, again, it's not just office space. This is all purpose-built to accomplish all of these different tasks and work groups. Our patrol officers are our most visible element, and again, they work out in their vehicles. They're out in the community on a daily basis, so they need a place to start and end their day and to come back and carry out tasks. We have investigations, administration, training, wellness and fitness, booking, support, records, evidence, and dispatch. So there are a number of pieces that all have unique needs for their spaces that need to go into this space. So we've talked about growth both with the police department and city hall staff, and we've talked about growth in the community. So what does that mean for policing in Dane County, policing in Fitchburg? So that means more sworn personnel to handle those basic calls for service. It means more professional staff to support those sworn personnel. It means more equipment. It means more calls for service. It means more involved investigations, greater need for specialized service, and an increased need in training, which we're going to talk about, an increased need in training space. In the area, these all things are going to play out as well across other agencies. The rest of Dane County is growing, and so we anticipate that there's going to be more calls for service, more police personnel, and all those things occurring in all law enforcement agencies across Dane County, with a decreased availability for training space, which we'll talk about. So the schematic design, again, if you remember, you walked past them when you came in here, these larger blueprints. We then fill in the details. So the preferred schematic design is 74,000 square feet. It's spread across multiple levels. It has the ability to incorporate sustainability features, and it does have training components. If you remember, the space needs study that was done forecasted we need about 78,000 square feet. So we're right in that same general vicinity as square footage-wise. So what does the building look like and what's inside of it? Again, to orient you with the location, Fish Hatchery Road, Lacey Road, the library, and then City Hall up to the right. So the building design sits in an L shape in that corner with the main entrance off of Research Park, and then some access off of Lacey Road, primarily for internal purposes and to access our Sally Port and booking area. Parking lot for employees behind the building, and then public parking just to the north of the main entrance. So this is a rendering of the front of the building, a view from Lacey Road and Research Park, so just kind of turning just a bit. And then a view from the northwest as you would be coming down Fish Hatchery Road. There's been some concern related to the visibility and the view that we'd be seeing a parking lot as you're coming down Fish Hatchery Road. Due to a change in topography and some foliage, the design is really going to be visible from the second level that you see here up, so you're not necessarily going to see cars in a parking lot. So certainly not going to test anyone's vision here with this diagram, but again, this is the L shape here, a lower level, the main level, and then the upper level is half of the footprint. It's less than half the square footage of the other two levels. So one of the features, if you've been to our current space, it's a long, dark hallway. It's not very open, it's not very accessible, it's a very long hallway. People often get lost trying to find out where to go to the dispatch window to talk to an officer. So one of the features is open up this lobby. Immediately off the lobby, main entrance here is our records window where people would first encounter an employee to ask questions or ask for assistance. And then to the right is a community room, multi-purpose classroom that we'll show in a little bit more detail here. This space can accommodate, is the community multi-purpose room, can accommodate up to 80 people with tables and chairs and more with just chairs. This space would be reservable by the community. It could be used for training events with the police personnel, either in our department or other departments. And then another aspect that it could be used for is a joint meeting such as this, Citizens Police Academy, any number of community engagement events that we could hold, both law enforcement and community members. We'll talk about the space right off of there. Right off of the lobby here is an office space for a social worker and our social worker meeting room. We just recently added a social worker position to the police department. Right now it's a half-time position, and it's not just focused on mental health. It is a very general social worker position, social work position, that really focuses on diverting police resources and solving problems from a social work position. Really focusing on repeat calls for service, people that need non-traditional services in our community, but for one reason or another still end up being involved with police calls for service. So having that office immediately off the lobby means that it has easier access for both the social worker and for members of the community that may be coming to meet with her. The rest of these pictures are just kind of examples of things in spaces here immediately off the lobby as well, is interview space to include an area called the soft interview room where we might meet with a crime victim or a victim's family if they're coming in to be interviewed, to provide information. That space is over there and suited with comfortable seating, lighting, and things that can make people feel a little bit more comfortable when they're having a bad experience. Something has transpired that they need to come in and meet with us. An interview room for someone that might be a suspect in a case that we have to interview right off the lobby. Moving down a little bit to the other half of the lobby, our records department. So if you're involved in a police call for service and you need a record for court purposes, a traffic crash report or something like that, those are the individuals that assist with that. And they have an office space down there. Moving through to dispatch, again, we have a non-emergency dispatch line that you can contact 24/7, and that person's able to assist you, get an officer dispatched, connect you to an officer, a supervisor, whoever you need to speak to. Our patrol officers, again, work out of their car, but they need a place to start their shift and end their shift with their equipment that they're carrying. They also have supervision here that needs the space to work from, plan work days for their officers, and then as the department grows, we're hoping to add additional layers of supervision so we can actually have a shift level commander in the form of a lieutenant. So this provides space for both the sergeants and lieutenants, and then some additional space for report writing and carrying out other administrative tasks. We talked about wellness. So one of the key spaces that we have right now in here is a break room. Our current break room is a converted coat closet. It's in a hallway with a microwave and a refrigerator. So we're hoping to have a space where we can sit down and have a meal. Officers are never really entirely off duty. They may have to get up in the middle of their meal and head out to take a call for service. So we want to have a space where they can come back to the police department, have a meal, and relax for a few minutes. In the corner of the break room is a staff wellness room. These wellness rooms are important. We talked about officer wellness. These rooms have a number of purposes, including lactation rooms for nursing individuals. And then we have the ability to adjust lighting, a whole number of features related to comfort in here. So if someone has worked the night shift and now they have to go to court at 10 o'clock in the morning, they get off of shift at 7 o'clock in the morning, they can come in here, take a nap before they head off to court instead of having to drive home. So this is really focusing on officer wellness. Moving through, we carry a ton of equipment with us, radios, tasers, body cameras, a whole host of things that need to be charged, so we need a space to store and charge those things. This is an area when we talk about accreditation right now, so this is called a Sally Port. It's a fancy word for a garage. Essentially what this is a space that if we have someone that's in our custody or care and we need to bring them into the police department for whatever reason, we can drive into the garage, close the garage door behind us, and then bring that person out of the car. Right now we don't have that space. So when we have someone in our custody or care, we have to park outside and bring them into the police department, potentially subjecting officers or that person that's in handcuffs to slippery conditions on the sidewalk, and so it's not ideal for anybody. On top of that and protecting people from the elements, it also prevents escape. It's kind of really one of the primary functions, but ultimately once we have someone in our custody and care, they're our responsibility to make sure that they're well, and so we need this space to make sure that that happens. Processing. So we don't hold anybody for extended periods of time. Anyone that has criminal charges goes to the Dane County Jail. But we do need a space so that we can process individuals, whether it's criminal charges or an OWI arrest. And so the processing area is unique in that it has a few core functions that are needed there. One thing that happened during the pandemic, as the Dane County Jail wasn't taking as many people into custody there, is that we were processing people at our police facility and providing them a citation. So we need still need a place to take pictures and photographs, and fingerprints. Indoor squad parking, we talked about why that's important. Moving through to some evidence spaces here. And evidence is an important part of our facility, storing it. We have to store a lot of evidence indefinitely. So we need a space in order to properly handle that, safely handle that, package it, and put it into our storage. So now we're going to talk about one of the training components here. This is an example. So there's a space on you can see in the diagram to the north end of the facility here. So this is defensive and arrest tactics. So this includes things like handcuffing, physical tactics that may be used to take someone into custody, protect an officer that are trained at the state level, their state mandated curriculum. This is essentially a padded wrestling room to a degree with pads on the floor and the walls so that we can safely practice those scenarios and training. One of the areas that we anticipate growth is investigations. We have a number of in-depth investigations that occur on a regular basis, weapons violations, shootings, things that require a lot of intensive work. And so we need a space for investigators to have a conference area, meet over a major case, plan a major case, and manage a major case. So there's a space for that in the investigations area. So I talked a little bit about training. Why is training important? We're going to touch on that here. One question that's come up is, were training components previously included in the design going back 10 years? What is the cost estimate of the training bay? And can you generate revenue with training components? So we start off just by asking, we don't see this headline very often on the news, right? Never happens. It's not generating a lot of attention there. We do see pictures like this though, right? Out of response in Uvalde, Texas to a school shooting where a lot of things transpired that did not go very well and ultimately led to the loss of a lot of life. Out of an incident like this comes over a 600-page report reviewing this incident that highlights a lot of key failings and issues, and among those issues that were a failure that day were training. Okay, so we want to be able to prevent situations like this through enhanced and increased training. So we can literally recreate in these training components, we can recreate that scenario where officers are presented with a door, move that door into that space, and recreate that scenario. So the three training components that we're talking about: multi-purpose training room or classroom, where we can bring in a speaker, we can bring in a group of people and instruct them, have a training, learn classroom theory. That's also a space that's reservable by the community. Defense tactics room, we talked about, is kind of like the wrestling room where we can practice physical techniques. And then the multi-purpose tactical training bay. So this is a space that's garnered a lot of attention about why we want to include this. This does have the ability for us to live fire our weapons, our handguns and rifles. It's a state mandate that we have to practice and be proficient with those tools. It's just a tool. It's a tool that like any jobs, you have a tool that you have to carry or use. You have to be able to be proficient with that tool. We're going to talk about how that develops here a little bit, but it also allows, this space allows for scenarios, for real life scenarios to be replicated in it. It does have a cost of approximately $2 million just for the space, and then another $2 million for the equipment necessary, including a separate HVAC system to allow for that live fire capability. These components were not previously included in the plan. We're going to talk about why in just a second. So when we talk about training, we have to do training. There's state mandates that we have to have at least 24 hours of training a year. We exceed that already by 8 hours. We have 32 hours of training. There are only 2 locations in Dane County where we can carry out most of our training. That includes the Dane County Training Center, Law Enforcement Training Center, and the Madison Police Department Training Center. Madison Police Department has the only indoor training facility in the area. Dane County is all outdoors. The next closest location where we could realistically do a lot of our training would be 2 hours away at Fort McCoy in Toma. It's a long drive. It's very inefficient, ultimately leads to increased cost and decreased availability of officers here. When we train our department, we split it up into 4 quarterly in-services, and so that means that we have to accommodate for 20 days out of someone else's training center's calendar to get those in there to get our entire department trained. Ultimately, what this leads to is really an inefficient use of time. So rather than having an officer out in the field, they're driving to a training location. They're driving back from a training location. It's a really inefficient use of time for travel and downtime. Leads to spending a lot of money unnecessarily. Outside agencies that we mentioned, Dane County and Madison, are under no obligation to train us. There have been some questions of why can't we work with Dane County to train there exclusively. They are under no obligation to host us there. They have to prioritize their agency first, and as their agency grows and as Madison grows, they have less and less availability. The Madison Training Center is booking out 6 to 8 months for training, so it's very difficult to get in there. So the average officer, if you want to be a police officer and you get signed up, you make it through the hiring process, you go to the Law Enforcement Training Academy. It's conducted throughout the state at a number of technical colleges, and you receive 720 hours of training. That's the same training that you receive any law enforcement academy in the state standardized curriculum, 720 hours, okay? Of that, less than 20% is spent on firearms, defensive and arrest tactics, and things that include decision-making scenarios that involve the use of potentially use of deadly force. So we're talking less than 60 hours out of that 720 is spent on that. Not a lot, right? Once they come to our department, after they go through a field training program and then they're in the regular rotation, they're receiving 32 hours of training a year. Again, I'd argue that's not a lot. That does exceed the state mandate of 24 hours a year. Again, they have to qualify with their firearm to state standards to prove proficiency, so they train with their firearm 3 times a year. And right now, and this is why this is critical, is the average police officer in the city of Fitchburg has approximately 4 years of experience. Through a number of reasons of retirements and people leaving the profession several years ago, we're down to a very young and inexperienced police department. It's not necessarily a bad thing. We have a lot of energy and ambition to learn and improve, but it means a lot of experience that we no longer have available to us. If you were to call the police right now in the city of Fitchburg, chances are that the officer that's going to respond is going to have less than 3 years of experience. So we're dealing with a force that is desiring more training and needs more training. When we talk about training, whether it's in law enforcement or any other profession, there's really kind of 3 different elements to it. We're talking about theory, we're talking about the why, we're talking about the classroom type of material, so we're talking about the laws and policies. We then move into the technique, so that's the how. How do you perform a certain function? How do you do that physically with a tool or a tactic? And then we're talking about the application, and this part's the most important part. So I can give you tools, I can give you the theory, but we have to train sound decision-making, sound communication, things like that. That's where you incorporate everything together into that package. You have that application. So it's a cycle. All of these things have to be incorporated, and the training components, including the classroom space, the defensive and arrest tactics room, and the scenario bay, allow all 3 of those things to occur in one space. Rather than having to drive 45 minutes to Wanakee to carry out some of that training, we could do that in-house. So when we talk about training, I'm going to show a diagram here in just a second. There are a number of things that we have to incorporate. There are things that include tools, that include our weapons, that include driving, that include things like using a shield if we're going into a situation. There's a number of tools that we have to include. But the most important tool that we have is our mind and our ability to communicate. So when we train with all of these tools in any training situation that we're doing when we're going out to the Dane County Law Enforcement Training Center and Madison Training Center, we're including these other elements to include communications, decision-making, de-escalation, time and distance. We're including all of these elements into that. Negotiation. We don't want to have to use these tools, and more often than not, we're not using those tools. We're using the other tools on the right here, the green, where we're talking about de-escalating a situation, creating time and distance, But anytime we use these tools, because we have the potential to use those in the field, we have to incorporate those two things. Moving into other topics that we have to cover in those 32 hours of training, there's a whole host of things that officers are expected to learn about that we might be able to consider in our training. So we have different types of investigations. We have basic crime scene investigations, domestic violence, sexual assault, OWI, traffic crash. We have mental health issues to learn about, active threat response, so an active shooter in a school, for example, legal update, evidence handling, photography, report writing. But then we go even further and we're talking even more, and this is where we talk about maybe community training and working with community groups. So we start talking about implicit bias, procedural justice, trauma-informed care, working with different victim advocacy groups, and working all the way down through dealing with different abilities, elder abuse, foreign language, basic foreign language, civil process issues, cultural awareness. So we're trying to cram all these different topics into an officer's this knowledge base. Right now, with our current setup, that time that we have, that limited time that we have to book those training facilities controls what we're able to train. We are really at the mercy of the schedule of these training centers. What we want to be able to control time with our own training facility. And on top of controlling the time and having access to that training facility at any point, we want to be able to control the content. Right now, the availability of these training spaces really heavily influences what we're able to do, and I'm going to show you how. So we are able to divide up our training into 4 in-service dates throughout the year. In between those 4 in-service dates, you get a period of time of 2 to 3 months. So we're training on a topic, and we're going another 3 months before we train again. So this is an example. This is just an example to illustrate what we might have trained in last year. And again, when we're training in firearms, in the front half of this, at the range where we can actually fire a live duty weapon, we're talking about all these other elements. We're talking about decision making. We're talking about de-escalation. We're talking about communication. Incorporating all of those things into our actual training and use of our tools. And then in the afternoon, we might spend our time 4 hours talking about these other topics. In reality, when we talk about 4 hours, that training might be as little as a half hour to an hour when you incorporate having to get multiple officers in a repetition on the course or in the scenario. Versus, if we have these training components immediately accessible to us, we can more than double the amount of training that officers are experiencing. We can build those skills where we're talking about bringing a tool together with a skill like verbalization, communication, problem solving, decision making, de-escalation. We can build those into monthly blocks where we can spend 4 hours a month with an officer training them in those topics, incorporating all those things together. What that then does is that takes the pressure off having to do those things in these 4 blocks, and we can expand this out. So this up here with training components becomes all of this. So we're able to train on our tools and our skills and incorporate those other skills that are really important. And then we're also able to incorporate some of these other elements. So trauma-informed care, domestic violence, active threat response, procedural justice, cultural awareness, mental health, CIT. And then also with this community space where we're able to bring in community groups and work together, we're able to then collaborate with other service providers on how we can train together and learn from each other in the police facility. So this is a summary statement here from the Dane County United Way Task Force report from several years ago. Essentially it says government entities responsible for funding law enforcement agencies in Dane County should provide agencies with additional funding to train officers more frequently on the following: use of force, de-escalation, critical thinking, professional police communications, and so on, implicit bias, ethics, cultural competency. The list continues on. So again, having access to those spaces allows us to incorporate all those elements into our training in a way that we aren't currently able to. So when we talk about price, we understand that the $4 million alone related to the tactical training bay is a price. But I would offer that incidents like this, where an officer confuses her taser and firearm, that result in a loss of life and result in a payout of $3.25 million, I would rather invest in the training to prevent something like this from happening than deal with these type of outcomes. So when we talk about training, the other question that's come up is if we build this facility, we're obviously not going to be using the training components all the time. That frees that up for other agencies because just like us, other agencies are struggling to find training space in Dane County as well. So that training bay, we believe, is going to cost around $50,000 a year in specific operating costs for the training components there. Based on the number of law enforcement personnel, sworn officers, and also Madison College, who has indicated an interest in using that space, we believe that that could generate approximately $60,000 a year in revenue. So essentially offsetting the increased cost there for the specific components of that training bay. So again, the average officer, if we remember, has 720 hours of training from a law enforcement academy, and then they're getting 32 hours of in-service training at any police department, potentially as few as 24 hours. And I've asked the question to a number of different groups and individuals. If you had the ability to choose who was responding to your call for service, for whatever reason you end up calling the police, if you had the ability to choose who you want responding, do you want that officer that has the absolute bare minimum? Or do you want the officer that's received more training and is more capable of responding to different circumstances, has been exposed to different circumstances, has had more repetitions in a particular type of call for service come in to assist you? No one knows when you're going to have to call the police, and no one knows what that's going to be for. The majority of people aren't calling us on a regular basis, and so we have to be able to be prepared for that instance and help in that situation. What sustainability components are included in the facility? So recognizing that technology has changed, that there's a focus on being good stewards of the environment, there is a $2.5 million allowance for sustainability. The Resource Conservation Commission within the city has taken a look at the plans, and they have elected to pursue geothermal systems for the building and some other improvements to address sustainability issues. I will also point out too that with the indoor parking, we're able to reduce vehicle idling. So that's a concern for some individuals when they see a police car idling out there. We kind of talked about why that's important with the equipment that's running in there and having to be available at a moment's notice. The other thing as it relates to sustainability, this isn't a traditional office space. A lot of office spaces that have sustainability features in, they get a lot of that payoff by being able to turn the lights off and turn the heating down. This is a 24-hour facility, so we don't have that luxury. However, we're still going to be able to gain some payoff on the features included in there. So why has the estimate already exceeded the budget? So in 2015, this study was completed. This really started laying the groundwork for the potential cost. So in 2015, some numbers were put together using features that are not specific to a police department. We talked about police-specific needs. We also talked about a few other elements that are related to a police department, including technology. So some increased technological elements were not included. Sustainability was not included. And then the interior components, including the fixtures and furniture, were not included. So that really helped inform that around $25 million estimate, which today alone, just on inflation, is $37 million. Rolling that forward to looking at what we're dealing with right now, increasing all those features, enhancing all those features to be specific to the police department, adding in sustainability, adding in the furniture, that price starts going up there. So you can see here that $49.2 million estimate includes the $2.5 million for sustainability, which wasn't previously in there, $2.8 million for interior furnishings and fixtures, and a $5.7 million contingency fund. So that fund is there to help offset unexpected increases in cost. So that's around $11 million already on top of that $35 million that wasn't really accounted for. So we look at inflation, police-specific design, and additional components and needs are influencing why that estimate's so high. So what has been done to address the increased cost? We have applied for a grant through the state of Wisconsin. This is for non-state projects that can have great community impact, regional impact. Law enforcement training components were identified as an angle to pursue in that grant. And so we applied for this grant with the potential of funding up to almost $7 million of the building with that grant. So No, I'll get to that. Yeah. So up to $6.7 million through that grant through the state. So as part of that grant, we received several letters of support from community organizations and law enforcement partners, law enforcement agencies in Dane County that indicated an interest in using our facility. So this is built on these training components. If the training components are not included in the facility, and again, that includes the classroom, that includes the defense and arrest tactics room, and the training bay. If those training components aren't ultimately included in the design, that grant application is kind of null at that point because it doesn't have that training focus. So again, this is just a state of Wisconsin grant. Additional measures include a review of exterior finishes and other project materials. We want this building to last for a long time, but we would need to be aware of the cost, and so we've addressed some of the exterior finishes to reduce the cost there. And then we're also looking at tweaking some of the space inside the 74,000 square feet to reduce cost. So potential negative impacts of the project is delayed or significantly modified. Most importantly, if this project ends up being significantly modified, i.e. downsized, ultimately we're going to be in the same predicament in 5 to 10 years where we're going to run out of space and need to add on to that space or build more space, which, as we talked about, things are only going to get more expensive with time, ultimately ends up costing more money down the road if you look at the bigger picture. We have continued cost escalation, so we're looking at around $200,000 a month for project delays, so that adds to the cost. A decrease in service levels and efficiencies, no space for new staff, so as the city grows and we want to add new staff, we have no space for them in City Hall or the police department. And then increased recruitment and retention issues. We have been operating at about 60% of our authorized sworn strength for the last couple of years here. We continue to struggle with recruiting and retaining officers, and working in an environment, a cramped environment that doesn't necessarily meet the needs of what we need right now can continue to impact that. What are the benefits to the police department and the community? So we talked about efficiency, and that's a kind of a hard thing to quantify, but ultimately efficiency means money. The less efficient something is, the more money it ends up costing. The more time that's wasted on things that aren't necessarily important. And then flexibility is also important as we talk about future growth and anticipating the needs of the police department in the future. Ultimately, these efficiency pieces and flexibility pieces impact the quality of service that we're providing. So when we talk about what the community expects from the police department, they want a high quality police department, a high level of service delivered to the community. That's influenced by competency, proficiency, and development of people. We talked about how young our police department is and the need to develop their officers. And then we also talk about preparedness. When we talk about training, a lot of people have brought up, well, you train officers for only the worst situation. You're only training officers for the worst situation. We have to be able to train officers for the worst situation because we never know if that worst situation may come. But ultimately, we are really training officers for those day-to-day interactions. The majority of interactions, we still need those interactions to be quality interactions conducted with competent officers. Quality people, right? So we need to hire those people. We need to retain and attract those people to come and work with us. So all of these things are interconnected. Again, we're not anticipating that we're going to have the worst day every single day, that every situation is going to be the worst situation possible. But again, if there's an incident at this school, we're in the city of Madison right now. But I can tell you that if there were to be an incident at this school, we would be the first responding law enforcement agency here with almost 100% certainty. And so when we're responding into the school for an incident that's happening, like happened in Uvalde, We want our officers to have experienced a situation like that before in a controlled environment. Doesn't happen every day. We need to emphasize the fact that we're using our professional skills on a daily basis to diffuse situations, but there is a time and a place where those skills are crucially important. So moving further down here, talking about some other things, wellness, recruitment, culture, having a positive and healthy culture in a law enforcement agency, increasing engagement with the community, increasing understanding with the community, increasing accountability, increasing accessibility, and increasing safety for everyone involved at the police facility, and ultimately improving service. So it's a costly investment, but in that costly investment, we believe we can provide a higher level of service. So talk about a few other things here. We talk about enhanced and more efficient service, more capable and competent police force, meet current and future space needs. So again, we talked about if the space needs aren't addressed now, they're going to need to be addressed in the future, and that's only going to get more expensive. We talked about increased retention. That means that we're not paying as much money to constantly hire officers, and it means that we have more experienced officers that are working on the street. Again, I have asked people in other fields, if you want to compare it, if you're diagnosed with a significant illness or issue, do you want to seek out the most qualified and most experienced medical professional? Or are you satisfied with just going to the emergency room or urgent care and just hoping that that person there is capable of taking care of your need? It's fair to ask that if we're going to deliver police services, that the people that are delivering those services are qualified and competent. So by increasing retention, we're going to keep that experienced staff and have more training. They're going to have more training under their belt. So potential savings through reduction in risk and loss. So we talked about accreditation. We talked about incidents that go wrong. So through increased training and accreditation, we can reduce the risk and loss to the city. Revenue from training components, we talked about, an additional space for the community. We can't hold a meeting like this at the police department. Not that we need to have everyone come to the police department all the time, but we couldn't hold a meeting like this if we wanted to. City Hall is booked a couple times over. There's no space tonight at City Hall for a meeting like this if we wanted people to come to City Hall campus. So we need a space, the community needs additional space to have meetings and to have gatherings. And then we also talked about decreased vehicle idling and environmental impacts. Ultimately, to summarize here, the impact of a new facility, realizing that this facility isn't going to come to your house when someone calls 911 and needs assistance. It's not going to respond when you get into a traffic crash. The facility is not going to uproot itself and come to your house. The people that work in that facility, who are kept well, who are more trained, and have a better environment to work in, those are the people that are going to be coming to your house. They're going to be coming to address your concern and your needs. And so we believe that this facility is the mechanism to help influence and improve that delivery of service to the community. So we're talking about a couple of key points here. So a purpose-built space that's looking at future needs of a growing city, a safer environment for everyone that's in that building, including people that are in custody or care. City Hall growth, as the city grows, the City Hall needs to grow, welcoming community space, and then ultimately aiding in the recruitment and retention of our personnel. Any city deserves an excellent police department. And as we're struggling to find police officers that are qualified, that are deserving of a career in policing and are well-intended, things like a police facility impact that. We're constantly competing for recruits, for officers from other communities to come and work for us, who have a high degree of training and are well qualified and are appropriate cultural fit for our police department. Having a facility that sends a message that we're prioritizing officer development and training. We look at individuals, they might not necessarily be interested strictly in compensation. They might be more interested in, can you develop me? Can you help me grow as a person in any profession? But in law enforcement, it's of particular interest, especially for our younger officers. And so when we talk about recruitment, we might take someone that's a non-traditional applicant for law enforcement that might not feel comfortable with some of the technical skills, but maybe a very good communicator, maybe a very good problem solver. They might just not be comfortable with some of the technical skills that we have to have, again, for those worst day moments. Those don't happen every day, But we want to take someone and be able to show them where we're going to invest in your training. You're able to train on site with our staff who are qualified trainers, and we have our own City of Fitchburg training curriculum. We're able to train them in conjunction with our community as to what the community expects. That's a strong message to someone that's considering a career in law enforcement when not a lot of people are. So we really believe that this facility is that vehicle to help deliver an increase in recruiting and retention, and ultimately a better service for you and everyone that we serve on a daily basis. So next steps, as the Deputy City Administrator mentioned, we're talking February 13th, next Tuesday is the Common Council meeting in which they'll consider the schematic design and a potential budget amendment. From there, then the next step would be design development. If you didn't grab one of those cards with the QR code, you can go to the website through the QR code and you can learn more about the project and watch a recording of all these meetings. With that, we'll turn it over for questions.
Can you hear me now? All right, so once again, question and answer portion of the time. If you have a question, raise your hand. I see a hand there, maybe, maybe not.
Yeah, I just want to, I think some of the young people have to go home because it's really late.
Okay.
So we can allow them to ask any questions that they have first before we
I'm fine with that.
ask my question. Do y'all have, young people, do y'all have questions? It's okay if you don't. I just want to give you the floor.
Just put your hand, if you're younger, I don't want to say what age it is, but if you're younger, you have to go home, raise your hand if you have a question, I'll find you.
Okay, it's okay.
Okay? Can we open up, how about we open up to everybody else at that point? If the question comes, you let me know, we can get them right away. Any questions, raise your hand first, and I see yellow come to you. And all I ask is you ask the question, just speak into the microphone so we can get it.
Give me just 1 second. So, I appreciate the transparency with everything, I suppose, is best I can give. Since all of you are effectively selling your labor power to the ruling class in order to oversee its oppression, do you consider yourself a class traitor against the people who sit in this room?
Hello? Okay. The City of Fitchburg Police Department, like any municipality police department, is there to serve and protect our community. We service our community through calls for service that come our way. We also protect the neighborhoods when they're quiet, if there's something going around, to see what's wrong. At the end of the day, we're here to serve the public, the community.
You say you here to serve the community, but I heard him say in y'all slide that it's a problem that y'all in y'all car using y'all computers when it's people sleeping outside. So you don't think that's a problem that we giving y'all this money to build a building so y'all won't have to work in y'all cars? At least y'all have a car to work in. Some people don't have a house to live in or a car to sleep in. So you don't think that's a problem?
Yes, we need the both. And the reason being is there's 34 square miles in the city of Fitchburg. So out of those 34 square miles, we might be somewhere where we still need to be, because most often the calls that we get is a disturbance. People get into arguments, we come over there. We're not trying to, the biggest thing we want to do there is interrupt the argument so it slows down and people go their own way. And sometimes that takes a while. We might have to sit there for a while. Hopefully everybody disperses, especially in the summer, and we can't get to the station. There's times when we're investigating more serious crimes, such as burglaries. There's evidence that we may recover and have to do that report at the station. So we need both. We want visibility. We want the community to see us in a positive way. But we also have things that we have to bring back to the station. And to accomplish both, we need a police station, our headquarters, to do our work, but we also need to be out there in the streets and be visible and accessible to our community. I just want something for all of you to hopefully comprehend. We wear this uniform, and sometimes there's that feeling that it's us versus the community, or you versus us. If we go back over 100 years, the main purpose of law enforcement, and it comes from Europe, Sir Robert Peel, is to indicate that the police are part of you, the community, and you are part of us. The more we work together, the more we collaborate together, we become one. And I understand that there's certain instances that happen out in the country, in other communities. But then we pass judgment upon all law enforcement agencies. And the one thing that I'm asking, and I'll ask you, how do we close that gap? Because I know there are people that don't believe in the police because of things that happen out in other communities. And we can discuss that at another event, but how do we close that gap? And we close that gap by having resources and facility so that we can work together. And the training component is going to be very important for us to be available to have things like Citizens Academy or community events where our youth can actually feel comfortable with the police who is a part of their community.
First, I want to say we closed that gap with the police stop killing our kids, our babies. That's how we closed that gap. For two, this speech that he gave was extremely too long. Extremely too long. We lost all focus, at least I did. I lost all focus and all that other stuff. And three, why does the police steady want to build a building or whatever to help everything that I heard him say was to help the police this, help the police. Not once did I hear him say help the community do anything. Not once did I hear him say help the community do anything. 50 million, billion, whatever, dollars can do a lot for our community here. We got people overdosing on the street on a daily basis. We got women 70 years old with nowhere to go, sleeping in the shelter that have to be put out at 7 in the morning for breakfast just to walk the street to get frostbitten. There's a lot that we can do besides build y'all a locker room. Build y'all some extra room in the basement so that y'all can take a nap for the next 3 hours to sleep. Some people can't even take a nap. Don't have nowhere to go take a nap. Can we come in that basement and take a nap? Can we come use that locker room? We mad. We do not need money to go to Fitchburg Police to build anything. Use what y'all got and help the community.
Can I go to her next? She was next. I'll get you next.
So, thank you, Ms. Jewell. Based off of that presentation, there was a part where you were talking about grant allocations and grants y'all have applied to, $7 million you would possibly get. And the finance director was talking about how this money can't be used anywhere else for whatever reason, right? I just want to know, are there other community organizations, obviously, who are already doing the work, who could benefit from that $7 million and put that money back into the community if y'all are able to apply for grants? And there's so much competition for community organizations to get money. Why do you think you deserve that over people who are genuinely trying to do this work?
So the grant, the grant is for building projects, and it was open to a number of different organizations, hospitals, community organizations. It's open. It's an open grant for those organizations to apply for construction projects specifically that have a community impact. Again, talking about a variety of services to include law enforcement or first responder training.
I got a question in the back I'm going to start.
Real quick, first, black people got a different history to police. 100 years ago is not the truth. History to police come from damn slave catchers. He just said, we are one. Didn't this country start with we the people? Or we were goddamn slaves, though, weren't we? They always have this language of oneness and community. So my question is this. This is one trick of white supremacy. They make us forget the past. And they want us to say other communities. You know, when Mike Brown was killed, they said this is not Ferguson, but then Tony Robinson. It is in our goddamn community. How do you explain the race to equity report? Dane County has the largest racial disparities in the nation. So let me ask you this. With all of these disparities, killings, murders, what oneness are you talking about? What trust are you building? When the people have spoken, we want $50 million to go back to the people. And you sit here and lie to us about a history of policing that is not true. And that is still not true to this day. So I guess my question is, how do you build trust with an institution? Forget these people in the suits. He just said, we are in uniform. You know, during the Holocaust, did they say, I guess just a question to the people, did they say, Oh, there are some good German Holocaust officers. Some of them helped the Jews and lived in the community. It was an indictment of the institution, regardless of what those individuals were doing. We're an indictment in the historical institution of policing. So I guess my question is, building what? Again, how? When the history never showed that. The history does show you, though, pacifying us with rhetoric that you know what part of police training, too, is? I got a PhD, by the way. You know what part of police training, too, is? Public relations. They come up here and train how to talk to us, what to say, how to convince us otherwise. I don't know what the fuck I wanted to say other than, fuck the police. Abolish all ass.
I just want to remind everyone that we do have children here, so please respect the children. Okay? We have children here, respect the children.
We got children being killed.
We respect your opinion, but respect the children.
We got children on ice. We got children in Gaza.
So I've got another question. I've got another question up here, so if we can get to that.
I don't mind waiting if there was more that you wanted to say. I said I don't mind waiting if there was more that you wanted to say. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
They talked about population increases. In 1915, in the birth of the nation, when the Ku Klux Klan was being created, they were scared of population increases because Fitchburg is 71% white. Wake up, y'all. Come on. They scared of us. Build up the jail. Tear down the people.
My question is about progress. So this is specifically for the chief. How long have you been the chief?
A little over 2 years.
Okay. So I'm going to ask about the progress. My first question is, what is the duty of this police station that you're the chief of again? Can you tell me, you said earlier what the duty of the police were, and I just want to clarify.
The duty of police is to protect. We protect you.
Okay.
We serve, we respond for calls. We're here for the community.
So are you aware of the ways in which the jails and the prisons that you take people to perpetuate the violence? That during the, I'll wait and ask you that, yes. Are you aware of the ways that the jails and the prisons perpetuate the violence and they don't actually solve the root cause of the violence? Are you aware of that?
We are not the people that decide the outcomes of individuals that perpetuate violence out on the street.
No.
Our purpose is to stop that threat out in the community. So if there's a victim, if there's a, let's just use the notion of domestic violence. One partner abuses the other partner. And that's one of our majority of our calls. We have to, per law, remove one of those parties in domestic violence. Now they're in our care, and if you heard the purpose of our facility is to be able to hold them temporarily and safely, because there are liability if something happens to them. After we make that arrest and we document our reports, we don't keep them for a long period of time. It's a temporary facility. They get transported to the Dane County Jail, where they may get out on bail, may sit there without bail, depending on what the district attorney decides to do with that person. Are they a threat to society? Are they a threat to the community? And if so, the courts and the district attorney determine that, not the police. That's not our job.
So I saw in the presentation it showed the prisoners rising, the amount of numbers that they have. I wanted to ask you if you think that is a sign of progress. The fact that it is estimated that by whatever year it was, that there would be such an increase. I want to ask you if you see the increase in prisoners as a sign of progress for the police department.
The slide that I believe you're recalling or bringing back is the increase in population in the city, which will increase the calls for service, which will increase our interaction with the community. That's what we're explaining.
So do you think it's a goal for the police to lower the amount of people that are taken to the jail, or is it the goal of the police to raise the amount of people that are taken to the jail? That's a direct question. I don't think you should try to get around that one.
Our goal is not to lower it or raise it.
Okay. I just wanted to get that.
That's
Thank
not our
you.
goal.
So okay. We got a lot of questions. I'm trying to get through them. I think you deferred to a couple.
Yeah. So, yeah, a few questions. I'll just say them all, and then you can answer them how you see fit. One, was there a feasibility study done for this budget? Because, sometimes I don't know everything, but I thought when you are proposing a $50 million facility, there's supposed to be like a feasibility study to prove that you actually need the funds. And to my knowledge, after reviewing the city council notes, there was no feasibility study done. Maybe there was, maybe I'm wrong. My second question is, last year, your officers snatched a 16-year-old black girl out of her car and traumatized her and refused to give her mental health services. And several people in this room, including myself, were a witness to that. How would this $50 million support your officers? And why do your officers deserve the support instead of our children? One more question, sorry. Who exactly is donating this land to you all?
So go ahead. So regarding the feasibility study, there was a feasibility study done back in
2014, 15.
Do I need to move over here? I need to move.
2014.
2014? So there was a feasibility study done in 2014. Ultimately, there also it has been $35 million budgeted toward this already. So this has been out there for, I think, 2014, 2015. I think that was also re-examined before we also took a look at this as well, too. So regarding the other questions, I don't know if you guys want to say any comments on that?
Sure. You want to try it, or?
Go ahead.
Okay. Can you repeat the question again?
So the first question was about the feasibility study. The second question, easy question, who donated the land to the police? And then the third question was, several of folks who live in this community, I live in this community, and work in this community, witnessed her officers snatch a 16-year-old black girl out of her car, and she was screaming in desperate need of mental health services, and you all chose to traumatize her, assault her, and put her in the back of a police car. So why do you deserve $50 million versus that young black girl and people like her?
Sure. So regarding land, I'll take that one first. The land was from Promega, I believe. It was part of their overall campus. It was a part of a dedication process, part of their development, I believe, as Parkland dedication. So it came from them.
Okay. As far as any incident where there is, what you're indicating, there should have been a complaint. We can look at that complaint. I right now don't recall a complaint that was made. If there was a complaint made, then it gets investigated through supervision and it works up so we can investigate what occurred.
Investigate yourself, basically.
It depends on what type of allegation is made. Sometimes we ask an outside agency to investigate it. So there's different levels.
Is another police department.
So ultimately, to answer the question related to where let me get back to the slide here. So we're talking about training, and we're talking about improving the level of service. If there was something that happened that could have been improved or addressed by training, this is something that this training component can impact.
All right, so we've got about 20 more minutes, and once again, we do have that hard stop at 8:30. I did promise you next, so I'll go to you next.
Okay, first of all, the first thing I want to say, that looked like a damn mansion y'all want. What y'all need all them rooms for? Go home and go to sleep. I don't understand. You got like 20, 30 rooms. A room to lay down right here, a room for him to go over there and drink his pop, a room for her to snack because she don't like her. What the? We can do so much with all those rooms, with all these teenagers that's steady getting in trouble. When is y'all gonna find things for these boys that's between the ages of 13 and 18 instead of just taking them to jail? All them future is jail because they don't try to do nothing for these kids. And not just that. What you have to do to be a police? Nothing. You don't have to have no special nothing. And then when they say training, how you gonna train for 700 and some hours to be out on the street to judge somebody else to see whether they wrong or they right? And what y'all need to do is test these damn police officers. They is something else. I'm gonna tell you something. Police came to my house for my son because a girl told him that my son, and it wasn't even under my son. And then he gonna try to push his way in my door. If I wasn't the type of person that I was, he would have got in my door. But the other man wasn't like that. But he was so angry and so over nothing, over a bunch of lies that somebody told him. He didn't even come to me in the right way. But anyway, I just don't think y'all need that many rooms and that much money to do nothing. It's ridiculous and it don't make no sense. All these people on the street, all these special aid kids ain't got no special ed teachers. We need some black teachers, we need some special ed teachers. It's just so much stuff that we need. Get them 5 rooms, them 25 rooms. Get on out here.
I just wanna. Let me reiterate a little bit of, and we heard some comments about who we are. I want to tell you a little bit about who I am and where I grew up at, all right?
This is about a police facility,
Well,
not about your personal space.
Right, nobody wants to hear it because I grew up in an inner city where I would sleep to gunshots every day.
Right.
Is that what you don't want to hear? He's like, I grew up in those neighborhoods. We talk about this, but that's where I came from, which led me to become a police officer, which led me to do the things to come back to serve you.
This is about
You need to hear that.
facility, not about
You need to hear that because we are not racist police officers like you think they are.
Maybe not you guys, a lot of
But I lead these. So
my kid's father just got murdered by 3 officers. You might not be racist, but you have a lot of them around here.
And how do we close that? By having a leader like me in a police department to prevent things like this. That's what we have here. Here to serve you. To serve you.
You probably one of the good ones.
He's probably not. Internal bias is real, even if you don't want to admit it. Anti-blackness is a thing,
Well,
even if you don't want to
I
admit
think
it.
the first question on the application should be, are you racist? Are you
But they don't know. Miss Berry,
So I've got a question back here from someone. I'm gonna go to him next.
I'm gonna be brief. I personally do not want to hear personal stories. I want to hear structural changes. So we're talking about training. My biggest concern is when officers are acting unlawful, engaging in brutality of the people in this room or the people in our community. Is this training gonna teach y'all to take down that officer and use necessary force?
Say that.
Want to get it? Okay.
Yes, absolutely. As training has evolved over the years and best practices have come into play, we have absolutely incorporated the officer override component of that into our training and use of force policies. So, I mean,
If a police kills one of us, death penalty? Why not?
They get retired. They get retired and they will send to another station.
So we've got another question.
Ain't no accountability.
Somebody in a way that's unlawful, I need to trust in the fact that y'all will subdue the threat with necessary force. And if that means killing your partner, that's what keeps us safe.
There's a state law that has been recently enacted. It's called duty to intervene. And we can have the law. You might get upset at my answer. We can have the law, but we have to be able to know how to apply it through training. We have the duty to intervene. And again, the training area is not only for us. We want to be able to house some of these meetings and invite you to come in there Invite people from the community to come be a part of that.
That's been, community policing has already been tried across the nation.
How do we close the gap?
Broken windows policies.
How do we close the gap?
That's qualified, not stop killing our damn kids.
So we've got a question here in the middle, if we can go to that.
Thank you. These are all very great issues for a social commentary evening, but I need to know some specifics about this building and this cost. As retired people who also live on set dollar amounts, I am curious. You did answer a lot of the questions that I had. Thank you for doing that. Now, if I'm correct, there is a possibility for additional revenue for renting this facility out for other policing agencies to use these training facilities, correct? And also, there is contingency money included in the price for, there are always cost overruns in every public building ever built in the world. I'm not but it's good to know that part of that amount is that 5.7 million, I believe, is on there. So that may be something that if you get your ducks in a row, we wouldn't have to deal with, correct? If we all come together and realize that if we want better policing, we need better officers, and the way to do that is through training. Like it or not, I appreciate when the police come if there's an issue, someone's threatening whoever in our neighborhood, or if some, whatever, all the many services that police provide a community, we're better off with some than none. And the other question is I was very upset initially from this postcard by looking at this live fire capability training bay for the cost overruns, but now I'm also concerned about the health of the people using that. Live ammunition, I don't know, it's been a long time since I've been around anyone that shot a weapon at me. Used to be lead. And I'm sure bullets and whatever now do not have the healthiest of materials in them. Does this cost cover the necessary cleanup so it doesn't get into our groundwaters, doesn't get into officers' lungs like the firefighter equipment has caused physical damage for those departments? Is that included in part of this cost for this training bay with live ammo? And is there any other way to do that using dummy bullets or something, whatever? Does it have to be live ammunition?
So part of the cost, significant cost there, is the system for the HVAC, for the ventilation, and then also for the remediation of those materials. So the technology has evolved over the years to the point where it's a pretty contained system. It's safe, that HVAC system running, and then that material is picked up by a vendor that specializes in that and removed from the site, so it's not getting out of the facility and into the environment in that capacity. So that is a significant portion of that cost for that capability. Does that answer your question?
All right, so we've got about 10 minutes left, so I'm going here next, but just keep your statements and questions as short as you can because there's more hands up than minutes left than 10. So.
Okay. Yeah, I just had a quick statement and then a question. So earlier when you were presenting, you asked the audience, like, if you had the opportunity to have an officer with more training versus one that had less, wouldn't you want the officer with more training? For people who are non-white, it doesn't matter, right? Because the police are always killing us. Police have internal bias, that training, like, police have been around for hundreds of years and have had billions of dollars invested in them, and they have not been able to get rid of the implicit bias. They haven't been able to de-escalate. They haven't been able to prevent school shootings from happening, right? And you've had billions of dollars. So how do you think that 50 more million is going to help you. I also am looking at a research study that was put out by the FBI's Uniform Crime Reporting Program, and they're saying that since 2020, when George Floyd and Breonna Taylor were murdered, people were out in the streets around the nation and around the world. Since then, and they're asking for change in policing and defunding of police. Nationwide, police's impact has decreased, right? So they're saying that when it comes to violent crime, you're accomplishing less, right? So instead of like before it was 50% and now it's down to like 36%. What makes you think that you all are going to be any different because you get $50 million when across the board, police are failing and solving less crime?
So a couple of things there. One of the impacts that happens is when we're reduced down to about 60% of our authorized strength and we have 3 officers working for 35 square miles, we're not able to be out there addressing as much as a fully staffed department. The other component of it is that every community is unique as far as their resources. Our clearance rates for things, especially involving violent crime, involving weapons and gun offenses, are sometimes as high as 100% when it relates to homicides and things like that involving gun crime. A lot of that is as a result of people providing information in the community, helping us solve and address these issues. So we can compare clearance rates and things like that, but Fitchburg is overall a very safe community in generalities. We are impacted, much like other parts of Dane County, with gun violence, and when those incidents happen, we do address them to the best of our ability. The $50 million for the facility, to answer your question directly, helps improve those efficiencies. It helps with recruiting and retention. It helps make sure that we're fully staffed so that we can handle these incidents and we can become more efficient.
All right, there's questions are going here, back, 1, 2, 3.
So 2 things before I ask my question. The first being, do not mention domestic violence as a thing you help with when 40% of your officers are convicted of committing domestic violence against their partners. I don't want to hear jack all about that. Second, if we're going to talk about your story and where you came from, then we also need to mention for everybody in this room that is not aware, he is here because in 2021, he was unanimously voted down as chief of police in the city of Milwaukee. So, like, if you didn't know that, that's why he's here. But, like, if we're gonna get to questions, then let's talk about it. You're talking about community capacity. You're talking about community building. I'm curious. So, I don't know if y'all saw when you walked in, but this building is labeled as a weapons-free zone. Do you expect us to believe that you're going to work with us as the community, whether we be service providers or community members, when you already believe that you're above the guidelines that we set to keep ourselves safe? Like you realize that holding a gun puts you in power. In any capacity, if I act out, you could easily claim right now that I am being a nuisance, I am obstructing you. You got a gun, I don't. So you expect me to ask questions and believe that you're not going to do something to me about it? You got a gun. You could have walked in this room, you could have shown community capacity and not one of you worn your guns. But I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 guns. 6 guns in a gun-free zone. You're going to be talking to me about there's kids here. Yeah, there's kids here, and you got guns.
You want to bring up Uvalde, but y'all got guns in the gun-free zone. Okay. And the school one.
All right, we've got a question in the back here.
Okay, so in seeing all of this potential money to be spent, and being the fact that I live in the city of Fitchburg, I'm currently a renter, probably not, but one day being a buyer of a house, and also coming from working for a nonprofit, we have to constantly work within a budget that we have, and we don't get any extra money for it. As y'all are taking this proposal up there with this building that could potentially cost another $11 million more than what was already brought, why not try to work within what was already given in that piece? Because even what's already given is already going to cost, the general taxpayer that has a single family home already was like $195 extra in taxes. Thinking of my apartment, my landlord's going to pass it directly on to me, with them getting taxed amongst probably, close to $1 million in that extra value. So has there been that conversation to say, why don't we just work within the budget we have and build a building that can maybe be a little more future-proof, that, as you say, that is going to grow, which it is growing, the city, as well as staying within that budget, so that we're not taking on more debt and possibly going over even the 50 million. Because, and then seeing projects that starts at 35, goes to 50, goes to 60, 70, what then? So why not try to work within the budget that we have so that it does not make such an impact on the community for the next 20 years? Because that's not just only me or people that are here that have houses now. That's going into the future that also has to pay for that.
That's a great question.
To only have it in that 20 years, have to do it all over again.
That's a great question. That's a great question. The budget, that was a great question, and the budget was allocated pre-2020. This is what it equates to in the current times because of the inflation. This project was started in 2014. Had we constructed this building pre-2020, we wouldn't be asking for more in the budget because it would have been within the budget. So this was a talk back in 2014, and nothing was moved on till 2023. Had we done it in the past, and if you equate what the cost was back in 2019 to build this versus now, that's why we're up at that price. But pre-2020, we had plenty within the budget to handle it.
Even because I'm working now with a project that was based out of 2019 numbers, and now we're looking at 2024, and it's more, but we don't give any more. We have to work with what we have.
Actually, sir.
Ultimately, obviously, this has to be approved by the Common Council. So, I mean, that is a scenario that could potentially happen. I think as Lieutenant Hartwig said in this presentation, if you built it at 35 million, there's already the concern that we're not building it large enough to accommodate the potential growth and future needs of the city. So that is the one challenge here of that is an option, but we know we're going to be back at this point at some point in the next 5, 10, 15 years. So we're trying to look big picture with this and thinking, okay, we know we need to have it as this size because we're continuing to grow and expand. It makes more sense to do it now because all you see in construction costs are going straight up. Inflation keeps going up. It's probably cheaper to do it now. So this is part of the reason why we're having this conversation. We have a last question up front here, and this is going to be it because it's once again 8:30. That's that hard stop.
Well, some of you, I want to thank the police officers for presenting this to the community. It's one of the things I've been in this community for over 30 years, but I'm also from Milwaukee, and you poo-poo the idea the man was trying to tell you where he was coming from. And I understand some of the things, but if you don't know history, you don't know shit. So you keep... Okay,
history teacher
ma'am, I'm 80 years old. I'm 80 years old. I'm 80 years old, and I've been in this community long enough to understand. There are so many things that we need, and we don't need confrontation.
Being on their side and not ours.
How you figure that?
Because you supposed to be one of us.
What do you mean?
You a sellout.
Goodbye, ma'am. Enjoy your life, just like I will.
Enjoy yours, too.
I dare. The thing that I look at is progress that's going to go forward, whether we want it or not. There are things that are going to be done, whether we want it or not. But the key is, are you going to be a part of it, or are you going to fight it all the way and not try to put some input into it? Well, that's a choice. Well, that's a choice. I know one thing, if it wasn't for police, sometimes I wouldn't be here.
Police, we still have 3 young men, or 2 young men and a woman that just got.
God bless you.
All right, well, thank you again for coming tonight. Once again, there are sheets in the back, I think in the hallway. It's got the email address on there. If you have comments on that, you can send that off. If you wouldn't mind, if you have stuff around here, just to be respectful of our custodians here,
Thank you
they need
for
to clean
coming.
up the room.
Appreciate
If you have anything around you, just pick it up, throw it in the
Thank you very
trash,
much, sir.
recycle it, that'd be great. But thank you for coming, we appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.